As dusk fell, she spotted a wealthy woman in the market with bags of imported goods. An elegant necklace glimmered around her neck, drawing Ifunanya's gaze. Her heart raced as she calculated her move. With a polite smile, she offered to carry the woman's bags to her car. The woman accepted, barely noticing Ifunanya as they walked toward the lot at the market's edge. She seemed distracted, digging in her purse for her keys. In one swift motion, Ifunanya slipped the necklace from her neck. But before she could hide it, the woman's fingers brushed her neck, and she realized it was gone. "Thief!" the woman screamed, her voice slicing through the evening air. The market erupted. People turned and a crowd gathered quickly. Ifunanya's heart hammered as she tried to escape, but rough hands gripped her shoulders, holding her back. In the bustling market of Port Harcourt, a young, dark-skinned girl with an oily sheen on her skin pushes a rusty wheelbarrow, sweat glistening on her forehead. She moves with strength beyond her years, hauling heavy sacks and crates for the market traders. Her name is Ifunanya, though most people call her Ife in the market. Known for her rough demeanour and hard-working spirit, she moves with a confidence that could rival any man. The market women mutter as she passes by, mocking her with sneers and side comments. "Even if you act like a man, menstrual flow no-go bypass you. You go still buy pad, Abi," they jeer. At home, things aren't any easier. Her mother, Nkechi, sits idly most days, calling for Ifunanya to help with chores or to hand over whatever she earned from her hard day's labour. Their father passed away years ago, and since then life has been an unending struggle. The villagers avoid them, unwilling to help a family seen as a burden. Ifunanya's two younger siblings, Chika and Abuka, are stubborn and notorious troublemakers in school. They never seem to listen, getting into scuffles and mischief that often leave Ifunanya to handle the aftermath. Whenever someone challenges her brothers, Ifunanya steps in, her fists ready to defend them. At school and at home, she has become both protector and provider, shouldering the burdens left in her father's absence. Unknown to anyone, she buries her small savings beneath the mango tree behind their shack. Each night, she hides whatever little amount she manages to save, digging into the dirt with her bare hands. This is her secret treasure, hidden from her mother's demands and the harsh reality of her daily grind. Ifunanya trudged home after a long, exhausting day at the market. The sun had set, but her clothes clung to her with the weight of sweat and dust from the day's work. She stepped through the doorway, hoping to slip into a quiet corner and rest her aching limbs. But her mother, Nkechi, was waiting. Arms crossed and eyes narrowed, she barely let Ifunanya breathe before snapping, "Now this little change you bring today? So this one go buy food for the whole house, Abi." Ifunanya lowered her gaze, avoiding her mother's piercing stare. Her stomach clenched as Nkechi's words dug deeper. "You just waste time every day like say you no know how to hustle. You be lazy girl, your papa no go believe say na so you go disgrace him name like this." Her heart grew heavy as the insults continued. Ifunanya's mind raced, searching for a way to make extra money, to bring home enough to stop her mother's insults, to ease the constant pressure and the ache of disappointment in her mother's eyes. But honest work had its limits. And then an idea crept into her mind. It wasn't something she was proud of, but the pressure was relentless, and desperation had become her constant companion. The next day, as she helped carry crates and baskets for customers, her eyes lingered on the small items they sometimes left unattended, items that wouldn't be missed right away. Bread rolls, small bags of rice, a few fruit pieces. Carefully, she slipped these into her wheelbarrow when no one was looking, her heart pounding with every quick movement. She justified it in her mind as a way to survive. This was for her family, after all. That evening, she set the small stolen goods on the table. Her siblings, Chika and Ibuka dug in excitedly, oblivious to the source of their food. They laughed and praised her, calling her a big sister with big brains. Even Nkechi didn't question the new abundance, eating heartily and nodding in approval at Ifunanya for once. Days went by like this, and Ifunanya continued taking small things here and there, bringing home food for dinner, her family none the wiser. But one day, a loud, commanding voice echoed through the market. The ogre, the head of the market association, stood in the centre, addressing the traders and workers. "Be warned, all of Una," he boomed, his voice thick with authority. "We don't tolerate thieves here. If anybody dey steal from market people, dem go face the consequences. Anybody way catch thief, make sure you bring 'em straight to me." Ifunanya froze, her blood running cold. Her stomach twisted in fear, and her hands trembled as she gripped the handle of her wheelbarrow. Rumours started swirling around the market, whispers of theft that seemed to linger wherever she walked. The once small, hidden acts that had seemed like a solution now felt like a trap waiting to close around her. The next day, Ifunanya returned to the market with a new heaviness in her steps. Each face she passed seemed to look at her differently, eyes sharper, scrutinizing her every move. She knew it was mostly in her head, but the fear gnawed at her, twisting her thoughts into dark knots. Even as she continued her work, carrying loads and hauling goods, her mind was elsewhere, consumed by worry. For days, she tried to ignore the panic in her chest, pushing it down whenever she felt the urge to take even the smallest item. But her mother's harsh words and her siblings' hungry eyes haunted her, pulling her back into the cycle of theft. One evening, just as she was about to lift a bag of rice onto a customer's wheelbarrow, her hand lingered over a small sack of beans resting on the side. She glanced around, and her fingers twitched, ready to slip the sack into her cart. But before she could act, she heard a loud cough behind her. Turning around, she saw Chinedu, one of the older men who watched over the market stalls. His eyes narrowed as they met hers, his gaze steady and sharp. "You dey look for something?" he asked, his tone casual but filled with suspicion. Ifunanya's heart hammered in her chest, and she forced a tight smile, shaking her head. "No, sir. I just dey help madam with her load." Chinedu didn't say anything more, but his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. Ifunanya turned away, feeling his gaze burning into her back as she hurried off to deliver the load. That night, she lay awake in her small corner of their shack, unable to shake the feeling that someone was watching her every move. The thrill of sneaking small items had turned into a constant, gnawing fear that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She thought of her mother, sleeping soundly after a full meal, unaware of the risks Ifunanya took just to bring home food. The praise from her siblings echoed in her mind, a bitter reminder of how much she'd sacrificed to keep them happy. The next morning, as she entered the market, she noticed a new sign posted at the entrance. "Thieves will be punished severely." Ifunanya's hands began to shake, and she clenched them into fists, determined to push through the day without any slip-ups. But as the hours dragged on and her stomach growled, the temptation gnawed at her once more. Ifunanya dragged herself back to the market, her stomach empty and her mind racing with worry. She was at a breaking point. The hunger pangs, her mother's relentless scolding, and her siblings' eager faces every time she brought something home weighed heavily on her heart. As she entered the market, she noticed the traders whispering to each other, glancing around with wary eyes. There was an unusual tension in the air. Rumour had it that someone had been caught stealing the night before. The punishment, she heard, had been brutal, public humiliation and a ban from the market. Ifunanya shuddered, imagining herself in that position, her face burning with shame as the entire market watched. The day dragged on slowly, every second feeling like an eternity. She tried to focus on her work, moving goods and pushing her wheelbarrow, but the urge to bring something home gnawed at her. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, a familiar voice called out to her. "Ifunanya! Come here!" She turned to see her mother standing at the edge of the market, hands on her hips, her face twisted in displeasure. Her heart sank. She knew that look all too well. "What is this?" her mother demanded, snatching the few coins Ifunanya had managed to earn that day. "So this small money na wettin you work all day for, you no fit even bring something small home?" Ifunanya's cheeks burned with shame and frustration. "Mama, the ogre warned everyone. If dem catch anybody stealing, dem no go pity dem. I no fit risk am." Nkechi rolled her eyes and spat on the ground, her expression hard. "So you go let hunger finish us for this house because you dey fear? No be you dey carry big chest for this market. I think say you sabi survive." Her mother's words stung deep, a reminder of how little appreciation she received no matter how hard she worked. Ifunanya bit her lip, swallowing the lump of frustration in her throat. She wanted to scream, to tell her mother about the night she spent digging under the mango tree, hiding whatever little she saved. But she held back. Desperation swelled within her, pushing away the lingering fear. She could barely focus as she returned to the market the next day, her resolve growing weaker. Nkechi's voice echoed in her mind, her biting words replaying over and over. "You no fit bring enough money again? Na so you go let your siblings starve?" Ifunanya felt trapped. Her heart ached with guilt, but her family's survival hung over her like a dark cloud. That night, she resolved to take one final risk, a way to get something substantial, something that would satisfy her mother and sustain them for longer. She promised herself this would be the last time. The following evening, as dusk fell, she spotted a wealthy woman in the market with bags of imported goods. An elegant necklace glimmered around her neck, drawing Ifunanya's gaze. Her heart raced as she calculated her move. With a polite smile, she offered to carry the woman's bags to her car. The woman accepted, barely noticing Ifunanya as they walked toward the lot at the market's edge. She seemed distracted, digging in her purse for her keys. In one swift motion, Ifunanya slipped the necklace from her neck. But before she could hide it, the woman's fingers brushed her neck and she realized it was gone. "Thief!" the woman screamed, her voice slicing through the evening air. The market erupted. People turned and a crowd gathered quickly. Ifunanya's heart hammered as she tried to escape, but rough hands gripped her shoulders, holding her back. The market ogre approached, his face twisted in fury. "So na you be the thief way dey cause wahala for this market, Abi?" He spat, his voice dripping with disgust. Ifunanya's pleas fell on deaf ears as she stammered, "Please, ogre, na hunger, my family need food." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their anger spilling over. Some shouted insults, others pushed forward to catch a glimpse. The woman, her face contorted with rage, clutched her neck where the necklace had been, glaring at Ifunanya with contempt. "This market no get space for thieves," the ogre shouted, his voice booming. "If una dey catch thief, no need to bring 'em to me, burn 'em on the spot." The crowd's mood shifted, a cold, unforgiving anger settling over them. Someone grabbed a bundle of dry sticks, another doused them in kerosene. Ifunanya struggled, her tears streaming as she realized the gravity of her fate. She screamed, but her cries were drowned out by the crowd's voices, their anger swelling like a storm. They dragged her to the center of the market, where the sticks lay waiting. The familiar faces that once smiled at her now glared with hostility, condemning her without a word. She thought of her mother, her siblings, of all the nights she had sacrificed, trying to make ends meet. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The flames crackled as they were lit, and the heat drew closer. Ifunanya closed her eyes, the weight of her choices pressing down on her as she faced the harsh reality of her actions. As the flames crackled and licked the evening air, a bystander rushed from the market, hurrying to the small shack where Ifunanya's family lived. Bursting through the doorway, the man shouted, "Come quick! Ifunanya! They're burning her in the market for stealing." Her mother, Nkechi, froze, her face draining of colour. She blinked, as if unable to process what she had just heard. The man's words sliced through her like a blade, and suddenly, every harsh word she had ever spoken to Ifunanya flooded her mind. She gathered her younger children, Chika and Ebuka, who looked up at her, confused and frightened by her panic. Together, they ran as fast as they could to the market, desperation pushing Nkechi's legs to move faster than they ever had before. By the time they reached the edge of the crowd, Ifunanya was barely visible, surrounded by smoke and the angry cries of the mob. Nkechi screamed, pushing her way through the people who sneered at her as they recognized the thief's family. But Nkechi didn't care. Her daughter, her only support, her rock, was in danger, and all because of her own relentless demands. She fell to her knees before the market ogre, tears streaming down her face. "Please, please spare her. She no be thief. Na hunger push her," Nkechi pleaded, her voice breaking. The ogre looked down at her with disdain. "Na this small girl be feeding all of Una? Na shame you dey bring to this market. You go reap within you sow." Nkechi's shoulders shook, her regret consuming her. She looked toward her daughter, who now lay still, the flames casting an eerie glow on her face. Ifunanya's eyes met her mother's, full of pain and betrayal. In that brief, agonizing moment, Nkechi realized the depth of her mistake, the burden she had forced on her child, the endless demands she had placed on her shoulders without a word of gratitude or love. As the crowd finally dispersed, leaving Nkechi to grieve beside her daughter's charred remains, she cried out, "Ifunanya! I know fit change wetin happen, but forgive me. I push you too far." An important lesson lingered in the air that night. Desperation born from unkindness can lead to tragedy. Nkechi's relentless pressure had driven her daughter to desperate choices, and in the end, she had lost her in the most painful way possible. The realization dawned too late, but it was one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Sometimes, in our pursuit of survival, we push the ones we love into the very darkness we hope to shield them from.